This isn't true. They should just do it and get it done so we can get to the bottom of this mess.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Lambton Kent Middlesex. Just so we know, we're going to have to cut the speech off in about 11 minutes. Lambton Kent Middlesex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 9 long years of hardships from an NDP Liberal government, Canadians are tired of being confronted again and again with undeniable evidence of corruption, mismanagement, and a complete lack of regard for accountability. The negligent Liberal government, propped up by their NDP accomplices, has consistently failed Canadians, leading us down a path of rising costs, crime, and scandals. The time has come for us to question the integrity of those elected who choose to benefit themselves instead of doing their duty to serve the public. We must face the truth. This NDP Liberal government is not only unreliable, but fundamentally untrustworthy. We as Canadians deserve leadership that serves the people, not one that serves itself. We deserve transparency and accountability, not a government that uses its power to cover up its misdeeds. We deserve a country where the priorities are affordable living, public safety, and honest governance, not one plagued by scandal after scandal. Let's take a moment just to reflect on how damaging these past 9 years have been. One of the most blatant examples of this government's betrayal of public trust is why we are holding this debate here today. The $390 million corruption scandal tied to Liberal appointees in Sustainable Development Technology Canada, or SDTC. The Auditor General's report uncovered 186 conflicts of interest, where Liberals insiders used taxpayer dollars to enrich themselves through various companies. Let that sink in. Through this green slush fund, 186 separate instances where people in positions of trust exploited public funds to line their own pockets. This is not mere incompetence. This is corruption at its absolute worst. In response, what have we seen from this Liberal government? Deflection, obstruction, and a refusal to accept responsibility. They have paralyzed Parliament by refusing to hand over unredacted documents to the police for a criminal investigation. The Speaker of the House has ruled that this refusal is a violation of parliamentary privilege. It has even been revealed that despite the Speaker's ruling, the Liberal government is still withholding and censoring information. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The Liberals even lack the integrity to follow the rules made by one of their own members. And yet, the NDP Liberal coalition continues to obstruct justice, protecting their friends while Canadians suffer. This government is more focused on safeguarding its own interests and addressing the real issues that are crippling Canadian families right now. This pattern of scandal and corruption runs deep. We have seen this government continuously attempt to bury its wrongdoings, not only in this case, but in over 15 other occasions in the past 9 years. The integrity of our democracy is at stake when those who are in power believe that they are above the law. Canadians deserve better, and they will get that when they elect a Conservative government. Speaker, this $390 million corruption case is just one scandal in a long line of Liberal misconduct since this Prime Minister took office in 2015. From the SNC Lavalin affair to the We Charity scandal to invoking the Emergencies Act without cause and freezing citizens' bank accounts, this NDP Liberal government has demonstrated time and time again that they are willing to break the rules to serve their own interests. Let's start with the SNC Lavalin affair of 2019, one of the most high-profile scandals in recent memory. This case involved allegations of the Prime Minister and his staff when they attempted to pressure the then Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould to intervene in a criminal prosecution of the Quebec-based engineering firm SNC-Lavalin, which was accused of bribery in Libya. When Wilson-Raybould refused to comply, she was removed from her position. That scandal sparked outrage, leading to Wilson-Raybould's resignation from the cabinet. The ethics commissioner ultimately ruled that the Prime Minister had violated ethics laws by exerting under pressure, showing a blatant disregard for the rule of law in Canada. Speaker, then there's the We Charity scandal in 2020. The Liberal government awarded $912 million in student grant contracts to We Charity, an organization with very close ties to the Prime Minister and his family. It was later revealed that both the Prime Minister and then Finance Minister Bill Morneau had family members who received payments from We Charity for speaking engagements. In the face of conflict of interest, the contract was canceled and Morneau resigned. While the Prime Minister was cleared of any wrongdoing by the Ethics Commissioner in this case, Morneau was found guilty of breaching ethics rules. Once again, we see a Liberal government mired in scandal and corruption. Speaker, then we have the Aga Khan vacation scandal in 2017. And this is yet another example of the Prime Minister's personal disregard for ethical governance. The Prime Minister and his family accepted a vacation on the private island of the Aga Khan, whose foundation receives millions of dollars in taxpayer money in federal funding. This trip was paid for by the Aga Khan, and it led to the Ethics Commissioner ruling that the Prime Minister had violated 4 sections of the Conflict of Interest Act, making him the first sitting Prime Minister in Canadian history to be found in violation of the Act. And who can forget the blackface scandal of 2019? During the federal election campaign, multiple photos and videos surfaced of the Prime Minister wearing blackface and brownface makeup at various events. Though the Prime Minister issued a half-hearted public apology, Canadians are left questioning his judgment and values. The list of scandals just doesn't stop there. Mr. Speaker, the trip to India controversy in 2018 saw the Prime Minister's official trip to India turn into an international embarrassment when it was revealed that Jaspal Atwal, a convicted Sikh extremist, had been invited to official events with the Canadian delegation. The trip was widely regarded as a diplomatic failure, and questions were raised about the Prime Minister's judgment and government's vetting processes. Then there was the Cash for Access fundraising scandal of 2016, where wealthy individuals paid large sums of money to attend exclusive fundraising events, gaining personal access to the Prime Minister and senior Liberal ministers. This scandal was so blatantly corrupt, it prompted changes to Canada's political financing laws and raised concerns about the integrity of the Liberal government's dealings with donors. Then, Speaker, there's also the issue of former Governor General Julie Payette, a Liberal appointee who created an environment of toxicity and harassment she needed to be fired for her gross misconduct. And what else would you expect from a friend of this current Prime Minister? Well, of course, also we can't forget the reckless spending. And despite racking up expenses while in her role, she continued to cause over $277,000 in additional legal expenditures. And ultimately, the lack of scrutiny in making government appointees and the problems that this causes are a very common theme for this Liberal government. The Winnipeg Virology Lab scandal in 2021 saw the Liberal government come under fire for refusing to provide Parliament with unredacted documents about the firing of 2 scientists from a high-security virology lab. This case remains shrouded in secrecy, with concerns about potential security breaches and the shipment of dangerous viruses to a communist Chinese military research facility. The government's refusal to comply with House orders has raised serious questions about transparency and national security. More recently, in 2023, we learned about the McKinsey contract scandal, where the federal government awarded $209 million in contracts to McKinsey & Company without proper adequate oversight. Many of these contracts were awarded on a non-competitive basis, raising concerns about the government's procurement practices and the potential conflicts of interest. So once again, we see the Liberals giving away Canadian taxpayer dollars to their friends. Remorseless corruption to the core. Mr. Speaker, and then we also have the Arrive Can controversy, or should I say Arrive scam. Corruption was evident throughout the entire saga of the NDP Liberal government's $60 million Arrive scam app, which could have been developed for a fraction of the price, but it ended up enriching GC Strategies, a shady two-person IT company who did no actual IT work, but had strong connections to officials in the Liberal upper ranks. Now, the Auditor General has confirmed that they will be conducting a performance audit of all contracts and payments related to GC Strategies and other companies incorporated by the founders. This will impact all departments, agencies, and Crown corporations who had dealings with the group.
I hate to interrupt the honourable member, but it has we've come to the allocated time. We'll move on to oral questions. The honourable member will have about 9 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock when she resumes her discussion on this question of privilege. Comme il est 14 heures, c'est le temps pour...
It being 2 o'clock, it's time for statements by members.
The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, gratitude and pride were the two themes that permeated at the opening of LaUna Local 183's headquarters in the city of Vaughan. Pride in the official opening of the new state-of-the-art headquarters representing 70,000 members strong and their families. And gratitude for those 400 workers who in 1952 formed Local 183, and the members who have followed and fought for better working conditions, better benefits, and a better and brighter future for us all. Mr. Speaker, I extend my warmest congratulations to Business Manager Jack Oliveira and the LaUna Local 183 Executive Board, staff, and members on this remarkable occasion. And to LaUna International Vice President and Canadian Director Joseph Mancinelli, thank you for your ongoing leadership. I also join the strong LaUna family in honoring two giants who helped pave the foundation of LaUna and the industry, Enrico Mancinelli and Julio Oliveira Sr. Mr. Speaker, my gratitude and best wishes always to the LaUna members that keep Canada moving forward. Feel the power.
The honourable member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, each year 2 students from each of the 7 secondary schools in my riding are selected to participate in a program called the Capital Experience. It was started 19 years ago by my predecessor, Barry DeVoe. During the past 3 days in Ottawa, they have learned about the various career opportunities that await them. I would like to introduce this year's participants: Calvin Smith and Evan Lane from IE Weldon, Sophia Ensign Telford from Fenelon Falls, Sadie Evans-Faulkner and Trevin Bain-Gross from Haliburton Highlands, Sarah Wojciesko and Daniel Patterson from St. Thomas Aquinas, Ella Wilson and Becca Lang from LCBI, Bronte Weber and Tyler Pettit from Brock, Allison Carroll and Braden Boughton from Crestwood. I'd like to thank the sponsors, the Lions Clubs, Rotary Clubs, and local legions, as well as the guest speakers for their ongoing support of this program. It's my hope that these students will be inspired as they consider their future. To that end, I'd like to invite my colleagues to welcome these young leaders to Ottawa.
The honourable member from St. John Roxy.
Mr. Speaker, the winds of change have blown through New Brunswick. Last night, New Brunswickers voted for change and helped make history too. New Brunswick has elected its first female premier. Susan Holt led her Liberal team to a solid majority government, bringing an end to 6 years of Conservative rule. Even Premier Blaine Higgs lost his seat in the red tide of change. The final tally is 31 seats for the Liberals, 16 seats for the Conservatives, and 2 for the Greens, including Green Party leader David Coon. It's a new day for my home province, and under the leadership of Premier Designate Holt, I am confident New Brunswickers have put their faith behind someone who will listen, lead with authenticity, and who will take their best interest at the center of every decision they make. Congratulations and go Team Holt!
The honourable member for Laurentides-Labelle. Today, I'd like to turn the spotlight onto Sylvie Bolduc, General Manager of SADC des Laurentides for the last 15 years. She's leaving now for a well-deserved retirement. and I'd like to highlight the remarkable contribution that she's made to the development of many large-scale economic projects in the Laurentians, projects that have had major direct benefits for the region. She set up Synergie Économique Laurentide, which is dedicated to the circular economy and which is now a leader in that sector. Sylvie Bolduc has made major contributions, has made a big difference in the Laurentian economic landscape, and she brought a feminine face to regional economic development. She was a pioneer who has cleared the way for everyone who has an entrepreneurial spirit. On behalf of all those who've worked with her, economic and community partners, Sylvie, I thank you very much for your leadership, which has brought people together, and I wish you a long and happy retirement.
The honourable member from Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, our government will always protect universal, publicly funded health care, as well as sexual and reproductive rights. These two principles underlie the Pharmacare Act, which received royal assent on October 10th. This landmark legislation will establish a framework for a national, publicly funded system for universal drug coverage, and very soon will ensure every Canadian from coast to coast to coast has access to essential diabetes medications and contraception. Pharmacare means that 9 million women and gender-diverse Canadians will no longer need to bear the financial burden of accessing contraception. Additionally, more than 3.5 million Canadians living with diabetes will gain access to the medications and supplies to manage their disease. We know that cost is one of the biggest barriers for Canadians to get access to the medication that they need. As parliamentarians, our role is to protect and better the lives of the Canadians that we serve. The passing of this legislation will be a lasting benefit to Canadians. Thank you.
The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Mr. Speaker, are you interested in a heat pump? Because these Liberals know a guy. He goes by the name of Carbon Tax Carney, Conflict of Interest Carney, Heat Pump Hustle Carney, and future leader of the Liberal Party Carney. He has as many nicknames as he does conflicts of interest. For instance, he's been caught lobbying the government to scale back rules on heat pump qualifications, helping his firm earn a few quick bucks. With sleight of hand, he not only pitches the idea, but he installs the product too. He's been caught trying to enrich himself with Canadian tax dollars. Brookfield is the name, $10 billion is the gain. It's clear that Carbon Tax Carney has too many conflicts of interest to be advising the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister needs to fire him now or bring him under the umbrella of ethics rules.
That's right. Great job, great statement.
The honourable member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, the passage of our Pharmacare legislation is a huge step forward for universal health care in Canada. Millions of Canadians and Albertans living with diabetes will be able to follow their treatment plans without having to make tough financial decisions. I am so proud that we will be able to help over 3.5 million Canadians living with diabetes so that they can focus on their health and wellness instead of the amount of money it will cost to maintain their treatment plan. Caring for our neighbors is what Canadians do. Every Conservative member in this House voted against Pharmacare because they don't want to work on solutions that will put the health of Canadians first. On this side of the House, we will always stand up for Canadians and their right to universal health care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, women and gender-diverse Canadians deserve to know their government has their back. With the recent passage of the Pharmacare Act on October 10th, we will soon see 9 million women and gender-diverse Canadians have access to free contraceptives if they need it. This will change millions of lives for generations to come, and we will look back at this critical moment for women and gender-diverse people across Canada and be proud that our government stepped up to make the Pharmacare Act a reality. Family values means valuing and supporting families. Free contraceptives through the Pharmacare Act is the latest policy joining universal child care, the Canada Child Benefit, and many others in supporting families. Our Liberal government doesn't just talk about family values, we invest in them through progressive policies such as free contraceptives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Battle River Crowfoot.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and it turns out CBC bonuses are also up. Yesterday in Heritage Committee, Catherine Tate, the Liberals' hand-picked CEO of CBC, refused to rule out accepting a fat taxpayer-funded bonus and severance as her term comes to an end. With its viewership down, ad revenue falling, and less trust all the time, CBC responds by giving $18 million in bonuses, including an average of $73,000 for each of the broadcaster's 43 executives, and millions more for its hundreds of managers. Then they pay for a $1,000 a night hotel room in Paris so that Ms. Tate can attend luxury balls at the Louvre. All while they ask for more money, fire hundreds of employees, cut services, and get woke. Even the Liberals admit CBC is making its own case for it to be defunded, something that Ms. Tate says is gaining momentum. Mr. Speaker, the solution is simple. Reject the bonuses, fire the Prime Minister, and defund the CBC. That's common sense.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Charlemagne. Mr. Speaker, on October 10th, the Pharmacare Act received royal assent. Among other things, this act will give Canadians universal single-payer coverage for a range of contraceptives. 9 million women and gender-diverse persons will be able to benefit from this measure. In recent months, many constituents in my riding of Longueuil-Charlemagne have told me the extent to which this bill was important for them. Canadians want to be able to choose if, when, and how they start a family, and our government has listened to them. Unfortunately, the Conservatives voted against this act at every step.
The cost of contraceptives is one of the many barriers to gender equity in Canada. Our government will always stand up for a woman's right to choose and make medical decisions about her own body. Our Pharmacare Act delivers on that commitment. Thank you.
The honourable member from Durham.
Canadians are sick and tired of the Prime Minister's misleading statements about gun violence.
Right.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister had the audacity to pat himself on the back over his appalling handgun crime record. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm a Canadian who lost a friend 3 years ago to gun violence, and I take the Prime Minister's deception personally. Handgun crime is up 116% since the Liberals came into power. Families are grieving, and the Toronto Police Association is calling out the Prime Minister for being out of touch and offensive to victims. Canadians simply deserve better. Canadians deserve a Prime Minister and a government that will stop the crime. Not this Prime Minister who is focused on celebrating his own failures.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost or the corruption. Today, the Auditor General confirms a full investigation into the Liberal government deals awarded to a Arrive scam contractor, GC Strategies. This shady two-person firm that did absolutely no IT work charged taxpayers $2,600 per hour for over $100 million in government contracts. Sole source deals that froze out hard-working Canadian companies. In the Arrive scam scandal alone, the Liberals' preferred contractor, GC Strategies, pocketed $20 million of a $60 million price tag for an app that should have cost a fraction of the price. Why did the Prime Minister give these Arrive scam middlemen $100 million since he took office? And when will the Prime Minister stop robbing Canadians of their hard-earned money and doling it out to well-connected Liberal elites? After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for these corrupt Liberals and their well-connected friends. Common sense Conservatives are going to end the corruption and bring home a carbon tax election.
The honourable member from Egmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For Islanders who live in my riding, this government's commitment to lowering costs has resulted in real benefits. Whether it was keeping the retirement age at 65 or making the Canada Child Benefit tax-free, the decisions we have taken have been a real help to thousands in my riding. The new Pharmacare Act is another important chapter in that journey towards a fair society. On Prince Edward Island, we are already seeing the results. Millions have been saved, and more importantly, Islanders know that they have affordable access they need to keep them healthy. And this is what I am hearing from constituents in my riding. Keep going, and more importantly, make sure you protect the gains we have made. Our lives are better than they were under the former government, and we need you to protect the gains we have all made together.
Order. The honourable member from Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize October as Dyslexia Awareness Month in line with Dyslexia Canada's campaign, Mark It Red for Dyslexia. This year's theme is Breaking the Silence, shedding light on the 10 to 20% of Canadians living with this often overlooked learning disability. Dyslexia affects reading, writing, and spelling, but with early identification and the right support, its impact can be reduced and individuals can thrive. As a nation, we must commit to raising awareness and supporting those with dyslexia by lighting up our buildings and monuments in red this October. Together, let's break the silence and advocate for the needs of children and adults with dyslexia across Canada.
The honourable member from Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, I would like to mark the 250th anniversary of a magnificent municipality in my riding, Saint-Jacques. This great little town is considered the cradle of Nouvelle Acadie, or New Acadia. Founded in 1774, Saint-Jacques was a refuge for many Acadian families who found there a place of welcome and peace after having been shamefully deported by the British Crown during the Acadian deportation, the Grand Dérangement. Nestled in the heart of the Lanaudière region, this municipality attracts gourmets and amateurs of history. With its impressive built heritage, it's also home to such gems as the Parc des Cultures, where you can admire an Acadian commemorative monument and a number of sculptures, each more impressive than the next, including the bust of one of my mentors, a great Jacobin and a former Premier of Quebec, Bernard Landry. Because yes, Mr. Speaker, I have to let you in on a little secret. The greatest asset of Saint-Jacques is the people who live there. People from Saint-Jacques, happy 250th.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
10 years ago, our country witnessed a horrific attack on the heart of our democracy. Corporal Nathan Cirillo, standing guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier, was senselessly murdered.
And this was just 2 days after the murder of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent at the Saint-Jean military base.
Both were targeted for wearing the uniform of our country, defending our freedom. But in the midst of this darkness, we also saw examples of extraordinary courage. Civilians rushed to aid Corporal Cirillo, showing the compassion and resilience that define our nation. And inside Parliament, heroes emerged as well. Parliamentary Security Constable Samron Son saw the attacker armed with a rifle and acted without hesitation. In a struggle that cost him a bullet to the leg, Constable Son showed unparalleled courage when he attempted to disarm the terrorist. His brave actions bought crucial moments for the rest of the security personnel to react and ultimately stop the terrorist before he could take any more innocent lives.
Today, we honor the memory of those who were taken from us, and we stand in awe of the courage of those who acted with such selflessness.
This alone is not enough. Unfortunately, there are people today in Canada glorifying terrorist attacks and celebrating those who commit these evil acts. That is why on days like today, we should not only honor the lives lost and celebrate the heroes of the day, but clearly and unequivocally condemn those who advocate violence to achieve political goals. Let us honor the memory of Corporal Cirillo and Patrice Vincent and grieve with their families. May perpetual light shine upon them.
The honourable member from Waterloo.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to mark the loss of Corporal Nathan Cirillo, who was gunned down 10 years ago today, while standing guard on sentry duty at the Canadian National War Memorial. On October 22nd, 2014, we lost a son, brother, father, friend, and a national hero. When we lost Nathan, a 24-year-old reservist from Hamilton, we all mourned as one Canadian family. My prayers continue to include his family and his loved ones, as well as the wonderful people who came to Nathan's aid. To all men and women in uniform, please know that you are valued and we appreciate your work. To our Parliamentary Protective Service members who continue to serve and those who have since left, please know that your efforts will forever be remembered. Today is a devastating memory in our history, and I hope all members in this place will continue to work together to ensure that the PPS is given the resources and the regard they deserve. As we honor the courageous Canadians in uniform who defend our values and freedom at home and around the world, we are reminded of the responsibility we all share to denounce hatred and to promote inclusion in our communities and in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Trudeau's there. Yeah. About time he's not hiding
Just
anymore.
also how all questions the
He's out from hiding. Come on, Pierre.
Mr. Speaker, 40 Liberal members are noting what Canadians know already. This Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. But those MPs are telling us that they need the Prime Minister's permission to speak at tomorrow's caucus meeting. So he will be able to muzzle them with regards to the doubling of our debt, of inflation, of housing costs and corruption. Will he allow freedom of expression for his MPs so that they can express themselves?
Oh, he's not hiding no more. Came out from underneath his desk. And then they turn off the mic.
So, the chair could not detect that this question has to do with the administration of government. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think, Mr. Speaker, we see on voit très.
We see very clearly once again that the leader of the opposition should concern himself with his priorities. He doesn't care about Canadians' priorities. We're delivering for Canadians, for dental care, for pharmacare, for $10 a day daycare. The Conservative leader offers only cuts and austerity and political play. What we are going to do on this side of the House is work for Canadians and their well-being. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, it's the Prime Minister who is distracting himself with political games because his own MPs, about 40 of them, have noted that he is simply not worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. They have lost their trust in this Prime Minister. It's strange that the Bloc Québécois keeps voting for confidence in the government when the own government's members seem to no longer want to do so. Members should be able to express themselves freely. Will the Prime Minister stop muzzling them so that they can express themselves to say finally that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the crime? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see the point up to which the Leader of the Opposition is only working for his own partisan politics. He's not working for the well-being of Canadians. We are here to invest in pharmacare, for example, that will deliver insulin for free to those who need it, that will deliver contraception for women from coast to coast to coast. And the Conservative leader just wants to talk about politics. He wants to talk about the cuts that he will make in programs that Canadians need. We will be here for Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we now learn there are about 40 Liberal MPs that believe that this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, and corruption. But there's this strange rule in the Liberal caucus that you need to have permission from the Prime Minister to speak at the microphone. So a Liberal MP wanted to get up and say quadrupling the carbon tax is a bad idea, or doubling housing costs is making people homeless. They can't do it. will the Prime Minister lift the gag so his Liberal MPs can say to his face that he's not worth the crime, the cost, and the corruption?
Once again in English, none of these questions have to deal with the administration of government, but I see the order. I see that the Prime Minister is rising to his feet. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it seems that the Conservative leader is confusing rules that apply within his Conservative caucus to rules that we have in the Liberal Party. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we see at which point the Conservative leader is simply focused on playing politics and gaining power. That's why he wants to talk about things that are not having to do with delivering for Canadians. He doesn't want to talk about the fact that close to 1 million Canadians will be receiving dental care because of our Canadian dental program that he says doesn't even exist and that he's voted against every step of the way.
Now, I ask the honourable member from Battle River Crowfoot to please not take the microphone when the speaker is up on his feet or when other speakers who have been recognized by the speaker is taking the floor. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to have to bring up this terrible rule. It's just that Liberal backbench MPs are coming and talking to all of us to say that they're not allowed to speak to him. And they're wondering if I could perhaps pose some questions on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, I guess they can't get anywhere with the current Prime Minister, so they'd rather talk to the future common sense Conservative. His own MPs, will he let them get up to the mic tomorrow to tell him that he's not worth the cost, crime, and corruption?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is he can't administer the government because he's too busy fighting for his job after 9 years. Even his MPs know it. He broke immigration, he doubled the debt, doubled housing costs, doubled crime, doubled the cost of living in a home. He wants to quadruple the carbon tax that's already forced 2 million people to a food bank, 1 in 4 kids to hunger, 25% of Canadians to poverty. Canadian food prices up 36% faster than in the States. StatsCan says we have the biggest gap between rich and poor in our recorded history. His MPs know that he's broke the country. Will they call a carbon tax election so we can fix it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, like all of us in this House, know that Canadians are facing challenging times. His solution, however, is to offer them cuts, is to offer them no programs that they can rely on, and to vote against things like dental care and pharmacare and investments in a green economy that is going to create jobs and careers long into the future. He wants to harm Canadians where we're focusing on delivering for them. He wants cuts to programs and services while we're busy investing in Canadians and their futures. That's the choice Canadians get to make.
The Honourable Member for Bailey-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, time is moving on. 4 million retirees in Canada, 1 million retirees in Quebec are waiting for an improvement of their purchasing power in a real way and not through slogans. Thousands of supply-managed farmers and producers are waiting for their system to be protected. Will the Prime Minister seize the opportunity to do something useful and improve the lives of 4 million retirees, 1 million retirees in Quebec, and tens of thousands of farmers and producers? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Like my honourable colleague knows full well, we will always defend supply management. We will always protect our farmers and producers from coast to coast to coast. With regards to seniors, he says that he wants to act. Well, we've acted. When we reduced retirement from 67, as the Conservatives wanted, to 65, unfortunately, the Bloc voted against. We also acted when we delivered an increase in 10% in the guaranteed income supplement. The Bloc voted against. There's a dental care program that delivered for close to 1 million Canadians. They voted against. The Honourable Member for Belleville-Chambly. The Prime Minister is manipulating the facts. But acting is something he'll have to do in a few days. In a paralysed parliament like this one, with a paralysed government like this one, we have made a proposal that will help people. A proposal that could stabilise Parliament for another few weeks. He'd need it. Will he allow his party to be eaten from within and without, or will he change things for the better for millions of people? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I've said many times, Mr. Speaker, I completely agree with the desire to be here for seniors who need our help, and that is the reason for which our government has enacted a number of measures in the past years to invest in seniors, to be here for our seniors. And we are open to working with people in this House in order to deliver even more for seniors. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, poverty and insecurity are affecting more and more people. According to one study, every month, 40% of Quebecers are a mere $200 away from bankruptcy. $200, Mr. Speaker. The situation is so serious that the expression tightening our belts is becoming too real. 20% of people are eating less just to save a bit of money. It makes no sense. It's a result of the Liberals' weakness in forcing CEOs of big grocery stores to do the right thing. When will the Liberals stand up, grow a spine, and force these companies to control the prices of essential foods? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the NDP knows full well that we have enacted measures to improve competitivity between groceries. We have delivered direct aid to families who needed it, and we're also delivering a program for food in schools that is saving hundreds for families from coast to coast to coast. We will continue to be here to support Canadians. We will continue to be here to invest in programs that will help Canadians, whilst the Conservatives are just threatening austerity and cuts.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
Last week, First Nations leaders respected the First Nations Caring Society by voting to guarantee all First Nations children will be protected from Canada's discrimination in child and family services. The Liberals had offered a weak funding plan with an expiry date. This discrimination must stop now and forever. Will the Prime Minister finally respect the Human Rights Tribunal, stop discriminating against First Nations children, and offer First Nations an agreement that upholds their rights?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, reconciliation means walking as true partners to Indigenous peoples, and we, of course, will continue to be there to invest in supports for Indigenous peoples. It means we will continue to work with them in the ways that make sense. I will highlight that the Chiefs of Ontario and Anishinaabe Aski Nation are continuing to look for ways to move forward with the government to support kids who've been affected in care. We will continue to be there to work in partnership with Indigenous leadership and communities to deliver the supports so deeply needed by so many young people.
That's right.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
After 9 years of the Liberal NDP government, taxes up, costs up, crimes up, time's up. The Parliamentary Budgeting Officer confirmed what Canadians already know. This incompetent finance minister can't do math. She's going to blow through her own deficit this year by $7 billion. That's higher taxes and lower standards of living. 1 in 4 Canadians are already skipping meals, and this Liberal-made misery is only going to get worse. Why not call a carbon tax election now so Conservatives can fix the budget?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am so glad to hear the Conservatives talk about the PBO, because just a few weeks ago, the PBO did a report on the sustainability of the federal finances. And I'm going to quote what the PBO said. Quote, current fiscal policy at the federal level is sustainable over the long term. In fact, according to the PBO, the federal government could even, quote, permanently increase spending by 1.5% of GDP. The only fiscal threat to Canada is Conservatives, who would cut health care, child care, national school fees.
The honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
That PhD in wackonomics has no clue. This incompetent finance minister, not knowing how to do math,
Colleagues, try to encourage as much freedom as possible in terms of the way people express themselves here. I'm going to ask honourable members. To, as much as possible, refrain from using language which is directed at a particular member and is considered insulting to those members. So I'm going to encourage all members, and I've spoken about this in a previous ruling. I'm going to ask the honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn to start his question again, but to rephrase his question so that he doesn't use that kind of language.
that sounds like liberal wackonomics. And this incompetent finance minister, not knowing how to do math, ensured 50% of Canadians can't afford basic necessities like food. She'll give cushy contracts to rich liberal insiders while telling the 2 million Canadians she sent into a food bank they can solve their liberal-made misery by canceling their Disney Plus. She knows higher deficits lead to higher taxes and lower standards of living. She just doesn't care. Why not call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can fire these economic arsonists?
I'm going to come back to members on this matter, but I'm going to encourage all members. I'm going to encourage all members to please keep their counsel when they're not recognized by the chair. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your remonstrations, but I have to tell you, speaking for myself, puerile playground insults from the maple syrup mega don't bother me one
As I mentioned, this is precisely the reason why we should be very mindful of our language, because the things will be said on all sides which is going to be disturbing to the order of the House. I'm going to come back to this matter, and I'm going to ask the Deputy Prime Minister to start her question again without using those words. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can handle it. But what makes me really mad, what I can't handle, is seeing crocodile tears from these Conservatives. The only time they care notice vulnerable Canadians is for a partisan photo op. And we know they don't care because they are opposed to a national school food program that is feeding 400,000 Canadian kids. They're opposed to dental care that is helping 1 million. We care about Canadians, they just care about themselves.
The honourable member from Battleford, Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs up, crimes up, and you know what? Time is up. This costly NDP Liberal coalition has doubled the cost of housing, and the majority of Canadians are unable to keep up with their grocery needs. Canadians have had enough, but the NDP Liberal coalition only wants to drive up costs by quadrupling their carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister finally call a carbon tax election so Conservatives can offer Canadians some relief?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, under the Conservative leader, slogans are up, rhymes are up, and parroting talking points so you get a shiny gold star and caucus seems to be up. I cannot imagine diminishing myself when I have the opportunity to represent my community in the House to cheapen the arguments that we can put forward on the floor of the House of Commons. If they care about helping people, why don't they actually support the policies that help build homes for people who can't afford them? Why don't they actually help advance policies that will let families put food on the table, whether that is childcare, a middle-class tax cut, or the Canada Child Benefit? Every time we put measures forward to help Canadians, they vote against it and stand up with this nonsense.
The honourable member from Battleford, Lloydminster.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you the Canadians that are lined up at food banks aren't buying their pathetic rhetoric. The parliamentary budget officer has already confirmed once again that the carbon tax is costing Canadians more than they receive in rebates. And for families in Saskatchewan, the quadrupled carbon tax is $2,000. Will the Prime Minister finally give Canadians the carbon tax election that they so desperately need?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me provide a few facts to the honourable member. Fact, the PBO confirmed that the vast majority of Canadians get more money back than they pay. Fact, over 300 economists say carbon pricing is the best way to reduce emissions that is best for the economy. Fact, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said her family gets more money back with the carbon rebate. Fact, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe said he looked at all alternatives to the carbon price and they were all too expensive. We are reducing emissions while we are addressing affordability. On that side of the House, they have no plan to address climate change. They are actively denying the reality of climate change. They have no plan for the economy. Shame on you.
Then I have
the honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Let's speak about facts. Mr. Speaker, young Quebecers listening to us are seeing a future dream of theirs disappear. That dream is of becoming a homeowner. In just 5 years, house prices in Quebec have increased by 74%. That's more than $1,000 more a month for a mortgage. The crisis was fueled, Mr. Speaker, by the Liberal government's compulsive deficits, with the enthusiastic support of the Bloc Québécois. Can the Prime Minister stand, look Canadians in the eye, and say why he's made their life worse? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my honourable colleague that it's this government that created the first national housing strategy that built thousands of housing units throughout the country. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, we've also created a tax-free savings account. Do you know how many young people have signed up? My brother, for example, who's 33, 700,000 young Canadians throughout the country who will see their dreams come true thanks to this government, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, it's not the Conservatives that are saying this. The Real Estate Brokers Association have noted this. $400,000 average price in Quebec City, $460,000 in Gatineau on average, $590,000 on average in Montreal. Mr. Speaker, beyond the numbers, we see broken dreams and ambitions for young Quebecers under the leadership of this government. I invite the member for Papineau, Prime Minister, to rise today and explain to young Canadians and Quebecers why he's made things worse for them and why they can't even buy a house because of his leadership. The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague for Louis Saint Laurent, who I like very much, talks about ambitions and numbers. He should talk about the ambitions and the numbers of his Conservative leader. When he was Minister for Housing, during his entire mandate, throughout the country, built not one, not two, but hold on to your hats, 6 entire housing units, Mr. Speaker. He should talk about his Conservative leader when it comes to ambition, so that he could visit 160,000 units that we have built in his riding alone.
Why is there homeless shelters and all that, right? They're gonna go shit.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Yesterday, Quebec's new lieutenant told us that the secular nature of the Quebec state is a matter for Quebec, not Ottawa. Oh, he's absolutely right. Ottawa has absolutely no business meddling in secularism. It's none of Ottawa's business to meddle in Quebec's ability to live together. Thank you to the Minister for this reminder. So we understand that Ottawa has absolutely no intention of going to court to challenge a Quebec law that does not fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government, right? That's what we should understand. Isn't that what the Minister said yesterday? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my colleague is right. It's provincial. It's education. If my colleague wants to inform and consult with the Quebec government, he shouldn't do so here. He should do that at the National Assembly of Quebec. That's the recommendation that I made to him yesterday. The Honourable Member for Drummond. The Prime Minister took advantage of his appearance on the Stephen Colbert show to declare, and I quote, "We're trying to ensure that people keep their culture, keep their language." Mr. Speaker, come on, that's not how integration works in Quebec. In Quebec, we agree on a common core: equality, religious neutrality, and French as the common language. Learning French and adhering to common values are part of integrating into Quebec. Does the federal government realise that its multiculturalism is simply incompatible with Quebec's model of integration? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, my colleague's right. Learning French, integrating into Quebec is being a Quebecer, growing and living in Quebec. That is the privilege of millions of Quebecers, including new immigrants. That's how things work in Quebec. He's right, and we're proud of it. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Ottawa wants to challenge Bill 21 in the courts and weaken secularism in Quebec. Ottawa maintains the religious exception in the Criminal Code. Ottawa refuses to allow the Multiculturalism Act to apply to Quebec. And the Prime Minister is telling Americans that everyone who comes to Canada can keep their language and that there is no common language, etc. There's no problem. In short, the federal government is undermining integration, harming secularism, and is hurting the French language. Does this government understand that what it should do is try not to hurt Quebec's ability to live together? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Blackbeard colleague, who I like very much, is just looking to squabble. Countless Quebecers, new Quebecers, arrive in Quebec because Quebec is part of Canada. When we're Quebecer, we are Canadian. And many new arrivals in my riding say that they are proud to be Quebecers and proud to be Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs up, crimes up, and time is up. The Prime Minister's own parliamentary budget officer confirmed yet again that the carbon tax costs more to Canadians than they get back in rebates. When the NDP Liberals quadruple the carbon tax, families in Alberta will pay nearly $2,000 more in carbon taxes. Will the NDP Liberals finally admit their tax is simply a scheme and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at the risk of correcting my honourable colleague from the other side, let me state very clearly, the PBO has indicated that 8 out of 10 Albertans get more money back from the Canada Carbon Rebate than they pay in carbon tax. And Mr. Speaker, but you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the word of Premier Danielle Smith, who said that not only did she get more money back, because she lives in rural Alberta, she even got the 20% top-up. Sorry, my colleague, that's the fact.
I ask the Honourable Member from Miramichi Grand Lake not to take the floor unless he's recognized. The honourable member from Battleford, Lloydminster. Excuse me, from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians that wind up at food banks really aren't buying that rhetoric. I'm sorry. Food bank usage is also up. Cold Lake Food Bank is the busiest it's ever been, with a 28% increase in usage over 2023, which itself saw an increase of 16% over 2022. The carbon tax is driving up the cost of groceries, gas, and heating, making things more difficult for families and food banks that are pushed to their limit. So the question's simple. Will the Prime Minister admit his carbon tax isn't working and call a carbon tax election?
Mr. Speaker, the numbers are in and the checks have already arrived. And in Alberta, a family of 4 gets $2,500 per year, which is more than they spend on the price on pollution, which is something the other side doesn't understand because, Mr. Speaker, they don't care if the planet burns. And, Mr. Speaker, let's go one step further. Why did that side vote against the Canada Child Benefit that gives $7,800 per kid in Alberta? Why did they vote against childcare? Why did they vote against support for workers? They care about themselves, not about Canadians. We're on the side of Canadians each and every day.
The honourable member from Regina Leuven.
That much hot air if you run a couple windmills, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs up, crime is up, and time is up. The parliamentary budget officer once again confirmed that Canadians pay much more and cost more than they get back in rebates. In Saskatchewan, after these guys quadruple the carbon tax, it's going to cost a family $2,000. That's $2,000 a year, Mr. Speaker. My question is, when will these Liberals call carbon tax elections so Canadians can have their say at the ballot box?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, it's really difficult to take any of this rhetoric seriously. When I was first elected 9 years ago, that party used to send checks to millionaires to help them with the cost of raising their families. That presented 2 questions. Millionaires would ask me in my riding, why am I getting this money? And people of lower income would ask me in my riding, why is it getting taxed back? What we did is we created a Canada Child Benefit that is tax-free and means tested. What we've also done is establish a national school food program. If you're really serious about addressing child poverty and family poverty, why don't you get on board?
The honourable member from Chicoutimi-Le-Fiat.
Mr. Speaker, the demand at our local food bank is skyrocketing, but the Bloc Québécois keeps supporting this incompetent government. It's ignoring Quebec's real problems. The Bloc Québécois is not helping the regions. Saguenay families are desperate with rising grocery and housing prices. When will this Prime Minister trigger an election so that the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean can be represented by the only party that cares about regions, the Conservative Party, the Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors? I'd like to thank my colleague from the Saguenay region. But after voting against lowering the retirement age, after voting against dental care, after voting against increasing the guaranteed income supplement for vulnerable seniors, now our colleague is getting up and asking why the cost of living is going up. Well, that's because your party will bring in cuts, and it's going to affect your constituents. Yes, I'd just like to remind us all that some of the questions today directed questions directly to members, and that's not how it should be. It should go through the Speaker.
From Edmonton, Griesbach.
The numbers are out, and last winter was the worst on record for Edmonton's unhoused population. It was so bad that over 100 people living on the street lost a limb due to frostbite. Indigenous people make up over 2/3 of Edmonton's houseless population. Indigenous people will lose their limbs and their lives this winter because this government failed to build affordable homes. How many Indigenous people need to freeze before this Prime Minister takes action?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr.
Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable colleague for his advocacy on the issue of supporting those who have the most acute housing need, which disproportionately impacts Indigenous peoples across this country. As my colleague very well knows, we have advanced billions of dollars specifically to help address some of these concerns, including support directly through the City of Edmonton, working with a partner, Homeward Trust, to make the situation better to the extent money can help. In addition, we have put hundreds of millions of dollars on the table to work with provinces who cost match. More than a month ago in his province, I had sent a letter which is yet to be responded to. In the absence of that sort of cooperation with other levels of government, we will work directly with cities and with Indigenous governments to help address this very challenging situation. The honourable member from Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, when I asked the minister about why he's doing nothing to stop Rogers from gouging Canadians on their cable bills, he refused to answer the question. He's not telling Canadians that his Liberal government is too weak to stand up to Rogers and big telcos ripping them off. It's under his government the Rogers-Shaw merger was even allowed to happen, leading to higher bills for Canadians. People feel defeated, and the Liberals are doing nothing to help. In fact, they're piling on. Why are the Liberals caving to big telcos while Canadians are getting gouged? Just because he's a Rogers rollover doesn't mean the rest of us have to accept that.
Again, I'm going to encourage members to be very judicious in their words when speaking to other honourable members. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it's quite ironic to hear from the NDP about standing up, Mr. Speaker. When they had the opportunity, I think they folded, Mr. Speaker. I think everyone in this House would understand that. Mr. Speaker, the member knows well, and everyone in his house, we stood up to the big telco in this country, and we will always stand up for Canadian and consumer. Mr. Speaker, we fought for more competition, lower prices for Canadian, and better choice. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, Canadian knows at home we're going to always stand for them, stand for consumers, stand for Canadians, stand for competition.
Yeah, very good.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Pharmacare Act received royal assent on October the 10th. British Columbia has been benefiting from that act, saving the province $28 million because of free contraceptives. Now, with the passage of this bill, women and transgender diverse Canadians can have access to contraceptives across Canada. The Pharmacare Act also includes access to expensive diabetes medications and tools, and these life-saving drugs are too often unaffordable to patients. Can the Minister of Health tell this House how the Pharmacare Act will positively impact the health outcomes of Canadians? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me start by thanking the member for Vancouver Centre, who's one of the longest-serving members of this House, whose tireless advocacy for health care in this country and for pharmacare are a huge reason why we have pharmacare. It was just passed, Mr. Speaker. We're ready to sign deals. And what is that going to mean? It's going to mean for people who can't afford medication, they're going to get it. That's not just an issue of fundamental justice. It's going to be about cost avoidance, about creating a system that avoids bad outcomes. Not only are the Conservatives against it, most disappointingly, they have no plan for people who don't have access to the medication they need. They want to cut dental care and other essential services. We're not going to allow it.
The Honourable Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
After 9 years, NDP and Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. And you know what else is up? Liberal cover-ups. The Speaker ruled the NDP Liberals violated the order to turn Green Slush Fund $400 million scandal documents over for criminal investigation. The Liberal obstruction of justice continues, with 19 government departments censoring departments and 2 agencies refusing to turn the documents over. So will the Prime Minister just end the Liberal corruption cover-up and turn the uncensored documents over now?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
That member gets up every day and says things that are simply not true. But what he won't answer, Mr. Speaker, is why his leader is refusing to get a security clearance. Mr. Speaker, that's the real question on every Canadian's mind right now. When we are facing a time when we have to put country first, stand up for Canadians, the leader of the opposition is hiding something from Canadians. The question is, what is it, and why is it stopping him from getting his security clearance?
The Honourable Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Well, the Prime Minister could release the 11 names, but he can also release the documents uncensored so Canadians can learn the truth about the $400 million Liberal Green slush fund cover-up. Canadians, I'm sure, will also be shocked to learn that on the Prime Minister's order, the more than 10,000 censored pages cover up the most important information about the Prime Minister's hand-picked Liberal appointees to the Green Slush Fund. The government does not exist to protect corrupt Liberals from criminal investigation. So will the Prime Minister just stop his cover-up of Liberal corruption and hand the uncensored documents over now?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Canadians expect police to follow due process, and let me be perfectly clear that the government obviously complies with anything that follows due process. But what Canadians also expect is that their leaders are going to act in the best interest of Canadians, not to protect their partisan interests, Mr. Speaker. Why is that member and all the members of the Conservative Party covering up for the leader of the opposition who's refusing to get his security clearance, Mr. Speaker? It's easy. All the other members have done it. When will the leader of the opposition?
For the second time, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from Battle River Crowfoot today to please not take the floor when he is not recognized. I will not like to do this a third time. The Honourable Member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Mr. Speaker, you ruled that the NDP Liberals have violated a House order regarding the criminal investigation into the latest $400 million scandal. The government's refusal to respect your ruling has paralyzed Parliament. The Auditor General found that Liberal appointees at SDTC gave millions to Liberal insiders with over 186 conflicts of interest. Mr. Speaker, will the NDP Liberals end the cover-up and comply with your lawful order so we can get accountability for corruption and Parliament can get back to work?
The Honourable Leader of the House of Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I expect my honourable colleagues on the other side to at least be honest with the facts. What you said was that this was highly unusual, this motion, and it should be referred to committee for study. We support that. It's only the Conservatives that are obstructing their own obstruction. But, Mr. Speaker, this is unsurprising because they're also trying to cover up their own leader's refusal to get his security clearance. Mr. Speaker, all of the other leaders of the political parties in this House have done that. Canadians want to know why. What is he hiding and what is he trying to protect? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Then I have Deputy Montmagny.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny-Kamouraska-Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of these Liberal scandals, once again our work has been paralyzed by Liberal corruption. Canadians need to know where their money is going and why 390 million taxpayer dollars ended up in the pockets of Liberal buddies. Meanwhile, Canadians are struggling to house and feed themselves. Are the Liberals finally going to step up and give the evidence to police so that Parliament can finally start working for Canadians? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, it's very disappointing that Conservatives will not tell the truth about this matter. And what is even more concerning, and what Canadians are wondering, is why the leader of the opposition does not get his security clearance. Is he hiding something? We are all wondering why he refuses to get his security clearance. He's clearly hiding something because it would be very simple to get his clearance. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, once again, Quebec is dealing with gang warfare. Warfare between organized crime, which has been a scourge for too long, and new, less organized groups that recruit teens to commit serious crimes. They are pushing children into a life of crime. They dangle a fistful of dollars in front of them, telling them that they will be able to have a better life. And then these young people can't leave the gang life behind. What will the government do to protect our kids from organized crime? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, the fight against organized crime and to protect our youth is extremely important. On this side of the House, we have invested $390 million to support children in this area. We are also doing more to support the CPSA, and we've also invested $3.5 million over 3 years to help Interpol. The Honourable Member for Avignon, Métis-Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, we need to carry out prevention work to prevent kids from joining gangs, and I'd like to congratulate everyone who does that work on a daily basis. But we also need to crack down against criminals who purposefully recruit kids because they know they won't get as serious sentences as adults. We need to stop them from targeting kids. That's our role. Will the government work with us on this? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
And I support this initiative that the member opposite has raised and thank her for her work on our Public Safety Committee where we've discussed this. We agree that it's crucially important to crack down on criminal organizations, particularly those who recruit young people to subvert the justice system. Mr. Speaker, this is precisely why we restored the cuts made by the Conservatives to invest against gun and gang violence in this country, and I hope that we can work across party lines to continue with this investment.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Kildonan, St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. The Toronto Police are on the front lines of gun violence in Canada. One of their officers was recently shot by a repeat violent offender. And yet, shockingly, yesterday, the Liberal Prime Minister took some deranged victory lap on social media for his attack on licensed, trained, and police-vetted sport shooters. And let's remember that after 9 years of Liberals, gun violence in Canada is up 116%. Their approach has categorically failed, Mr. Speaker. When will they finally get tough on the criminals responsible for gun violence?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, it's a shame to see once again Conservatives using the talking points of the gun lobby instead of standing up for victims of crime and standing up to get guns off our streets. Mr. Speaker, we also know that women are disproportionately affected by gun violence, and what do Conservatives do? They want more guns on our streets. They cut funds from CBSA to stop the import of illegal guns and then stand in this place acting as if they support victims of crime. Mr. Speaker, it's a shame. We have committed to get guns off our street while Conservatives work for the gun lobby.
The Honourable Member from Kildonan, St. Paul.
In the words of the Toronto Police Association to this Liberal Prime Minister, quote, criminals did not get your message. Our communities are experiencing a 45% increase in shootings, a 62% increase in gun-related homicides compared to the last year. What difference does your handgun ban make when 85% of guns seized by our members can be sourced in the United States? Your statement is out of touch and offensive to victims of crime and police officers everywhere. Whatever you think you've done to improve community safety has not worked. When will the Liberals call an election so we can finally bring an end to the crime and chaos they created in our streets?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, once again, let's talk about Conservative logic. They think putting more guns on our street is going to somehow keep our communities safer. We know that that doesn't work. Their cuts to CBSA to allow the import of illegal guns is something that we have had to clean up. Conservatives care only about the gun lobby and not about Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we have put in place
I'm actually going to. I've been having difficulty hearing the answer to this question, and I'm gonna, So I'm going to ask honorable members, please, to allow us to hear the answer to this question. There was a lot, from the moment that this member stood up, a lot of heckling. I'm going to ask the honorable member to start. The honorable member, the honorable parliamentary secretary, can please start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that every time I stand in this place and call out conservative hypocrisy around violence in our communities, they can't stand it. This is why they try to silence voices like mine who stand up for women in particular who are disproportionately affected by gun violence. Mr. Speaker, what conservatives believe is more guns on our street will somehow help keep our communities safe. But we know what keeps communities safe is getting these guns off our streets, investing in CBSA to protect our borders, while conservatives take their talking points from the gun lobby.
The honourable member for Bellechasse is Ishmael. Mr. Speaker, for 9 years, this Liberal government has brought in policies that have caused a dramatic increase in crime, drug trafficking, arson, street gangs recruiting kids. Canadians and Quebecers are living in fear, but instead of helping Quebecers and doing something about this incompetence, the Bloc Québécois is continuing to support this bungling government. The government's inaction will definitely cause numbers of victims to surge over the next year. We need to bring back common sense and trigger an election. Do they have the courage to do that? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I can barely believe this conservative hypocrisy. They voted against all of our measures to do something to freeze the handgun market throughout the country. They stand up in this house and they ask about gun violence. It makes no sense. We know that we need to take action, and we have taken concrete action. 1 year ago, we did something about the handgun market, and it's starting to bear fruit. We want all parties in this house to help ensure that our communities remain safe. The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, this month, Medicare legislation came into force in Canada. 9 million women will be able to take informed decisions about contraceptives without having to worry about pain. Can the Minister of Tourism tell the House about how the Medicare program will guarantee that women have the reproductive autonomy that they deserve? The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her activism in the area of women's rights. This Medicare legislation is historic. This pharmacare legislation, rather, is historic and will allow people like my own daughter to be able to access contraceptive choices without having to worry about how to pay for it. Unlike the Conservatives, who want to take that choice away from women, we will always support women's autonomy when it comes to making choices about their bodies and their future.
The Honourable Member from Calgary-Midnaport.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, taxes are up, costs are up, corruption is up, and time is up. The Auditor General is finally investigating GC Strategies, who received $100 million from this government and $20 million for the Arrive scam scandal. But this is only one incident of Liberal insider corruption. The Green Slush Fund, McKinsey, Global Affairs Canada, Environment Canada. So just how much taxpayer money did the Prime Minister give fraudsters and scamsters?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, while Conservatives play with theatrics, we're actually committed to ensuring that our procurement system is something that Canadians have trust in. This is anybody who has operated without following the rules, and the laws should be held accountable. We've said that from the beginning. This is precisely why CBSA has already initiated a number of measures and recommendations and are working with the Auditor General to ensure that there is trust in our procurement system, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
After 9 years of NTP Liberals, taxes are up, corruption is up, crime is up, time is up. Yesterday, the Auditor General announced that she will be investigating the $100 million in contracts awarded to GC Strategies by this Liberal government, a two-person IT company that did no IT work, but was paid $20 million for the Arrive Scam app. It's been months since the Liberal minister promised to recover the money paid to GC Strategies. When will the Prime Minister get taxpayers their money back?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we welcome the opportunity to get to the bottom of the situation to ensure that our procurement system has trust in it. But let's also be clear with Canadians in the fact that it was the Conservative Party who first initiated contracts with this company. And so I really hope the Auditor General looks back and ensures that any wrongdoing is also looked at the beginning of contracts with this company, Mr. Speaker, because all Canadians deserve to know that there is trust in our procurement system. Oh, we got quiet all of a sudden.
It's not true. L'honorable député de Mégantic-L'Érable.
The honourable member from Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, 2 million Canadians are lining up at food banks every month, but meanwhile, Liberal buddies are lining up to fill their own pockets. Do you remember GC Strategies? 2 guys in the basement who received a $20 million contract to develop ArriveCan, even though they had no IT expertise. And we've just heard that the AG has announced that she will be investigating the $100 million in contracts that GC Strategies got. GC Strategies took advantage of this Liberal largesse. Meanwhile, who paid the bill? Taxpayers. How many Liberal buddies have raked in the profits while emptying the pockets of Canadian families? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague already very clearly stated, there is a question that we've never gotten the answer to. My colleague just talked about the fact that some children don't have enough to eat and that kids need to be able to have eaten a good breakfast before they go to school. So how is it that the Conservative Party doesn't want to help children have enough to eat when they go to school? After all, how can Conservatives justify this attitude with their own constituents?
Le député de Mégantic-L'Érable a eu sa chance à poser.
The member has already had a chance to ask a question, so I would encourage him to continue this discussion outside the House.
Député de Châteauguay-Lacolle.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Access to contraceptives like the birth control pill improves equality and provides women with the ability to decide if or when they will start a family. We know that cost is the single most significant barrier for women and gender-diverse Canadians in accessing these medicines. Can the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth please share with this House how the Pharmacare Act will impact Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Women, Gender Equality and Youth.
Mr. Speaker, access to contraception shouldn't be a luxury, but a fundamental right. And the Pharmacare Act provides women and gender-diverse people with the freedom to make their own choices about their bodies and not worry about the cost, Mr. Speaker. But Conservatives don't want Canadians to have free access to contraceptives or reproductive freedom. How do we know this? Because members opposite continue to introduce anti-choice petitions and bills. Make no mistake, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives will cut free contraceptives. On this side of the House, we will always stand for choice.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver East.
The Conservatives created the low-wage temporary foreign workers stream, and the Liberals steal it to help rich CEOs. They restricted workers to one employer with closed work permits, subjected migrant workers to abuse, wage theft, end exploitation and suppress wages for Canadians. Chain CEOs are ramping up exploitation and abuse. Workers like Rowell Paving said their boss, Canadian Tire, paid them less wages and threatened them if they told anyone. Will the Liberals stop caving to CEOs and end the abuse with open work permits?
The Honourable Minister for Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question, and as I've been very clear in this chamber and a committee, there's a new sheriff in town, and businesses need to be very careful and need to make sure that they are respecting workers from coast to coast to coast. Stay tuned later today, Mr. Speaker, for more changes to the temporary foreign worker program. We are serious about making sure that that program is a program of last resort. Jobs belong in the hands of Canadians, of youth, of newcomers, and of people who already live here. Mr. Speaker, we're going to make sure the temporary foreign program is cleaned up. That's what we promise the Canadians. Is exactly what we're going to do.
The Honourable Member from Churchill-Kiwatanuk-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Bloc and Liberals joined together in committee to cover up the soccer drone scandal that took place during the Olympics. The Liberals refused to investigate how this happened and are happy to ignore the problem, which is apparently good enough for the Bloc, who shamefully joined them. Canadians deserve better. They deserve to know that this won't happen again. Why won't the government support accountability? Why won't they listen to the players, the soccer community, and fans who want to ensure that the focus is on the tremendous effort on the pitch and not on the actions of a few people and institutions that don't get it, that soccer, like any sport, should be about fair play and integrity.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the committee, of course, is free to determine its own business, but I can assure this House that upon learning of this scandal, this government took immediate action and suspended the funding to Soccer Canada for the coaches that were implicated. There's also been direct action taken by FIFA, by the Canadian Olympic Committee, by Soccer Canada itself, and I can assure you we're watching the situation closely.
Comme il est 15h20,